It is time for me to wrap up my reads from June. So let's jump into everything I read this past month. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. I make content about books and I occasionally live stream my Switch play when I feel like it. If that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing. This is the standard BookTube monthly wrap up video. We're going to go through my Storygraph stats per usual. We're going to go through my Bookly app, flip through it, see everything I read. I'll tell you a little bit about it, essentially tell you if I cared about it or not, and then we're going to move on with our lives. Moving over. Starting right off with my Storygraph stats from June. I had a much slower month in June than usual because I've just been very busy. I think I mentioned this in some other videos that, work has been crazy. I'm getting ready. I'm getting used to a new job. And I can only read so much. So I read 17 books this month, which was 6,182 pages. I know it sounds like a lot of books, but I usually read like over 20. So that's a significant difference in my humble opinion. It has no like merit weight or emotional weight or anything like that. It's just different. These are just numbers. Everybody relax. My moods for my reading, per usual, are pretty dark and emotional. We got a little adventurous this month, usually reflective, mysterious. As always, not much. Actually, no, lies. Look at that lighthearted coming up to the top. What did I read that was so lighthearted? Is that why I didn't really like my reading this month? Were my books too happy? Pace, medium and slow, nothing fast paced. Page numbers, I read a little bit of big books, but mostly as usual between like little books under 300 and 3 to 500 page books. 3 to 500 page books are probably like my general sweet spot, but I tend to also get some smaller books in there. I did read a little bit of nonfiction, not a lot. And then like my genres this month is a very small list. Lit fic, LGBTQIA+, fantasy, romance, sci-fi, horror. As usual, it's gay. So my genres look a bit like normal, a little bit more romance than usual. Yeah, I guess that's where all the happy stuff came from. And my average rating was 3.68, which is about average. I seem to be like at this 3.5 to 3.8 sort of range every month for the year. So I don't know. For some reason, that still doesn't feel like I'm really enjoying my reads. I'm enjoying some of them, but it still doesn't feel like a wholly enjoyable reading year. But we'll see. We'll see. So that's the boring stat stuff, which I like, but I don't know. Maybe you guys don't. But then let's get into my Bookly app, and I get asked, I think, pretty much every time we do this, what the heck is Bookly? And I tell you what Bookly is. Bookly is an app that I use to track my reading. It tracks the time that I read. I like to have a goal where I read a certain amount every day, and it helps me stay in that goal, and it keeps track of my reading, and that's really all it is. And it also facilitates my ability to go through these wrap ups without making them really laborious, because when you read a lot of books, that's what happens. Anyway, starting right off with Rebecca Thorne's This Gilded Abyss, which has its own review on this channel. You already know I really like it if you've seen that. If you haven't seen it, guess what? Spoiler, I like it. It's a fantasy. It's the first book in a new series. It's self-pubbed. It's queer. It's set under the water, which for the month of June was appropriate. And it's a good time. It's a good time. I enjoy it. She is not afraid to kill off characters, which I love because you need that. I need you to play with my emotions, and she does. Furious Heaven by Kate Elliott is the second in her sci-fi series that's kind of like loosely based on Alexander the Great. It is incredibly long. This was a chunker, and it's very dense and action-packed, and it's like a pretty mid book. Like this whole series overall is a little bit forgettable. I do enjoy certain characters and certain plot lines in the book, so I'll keep going. Oh, and this just came out this year, so the third book will come out probably maybe next year or the year after. So I'll finish it because I've come this far, and like I want to know what happens with Persephone and stuff. But it is very long, very convoluted. There's more court intrigue this time around. Our main character's son has, like, had to step into her own. Persephone's doing her own thing. The thing I really like is there's this relationship between Persephone and this other guy whose name I cannot remember, and he's kinda like I think he's like a goth toy, like, basically, he's like a programmed assassin, and if he sees Persephone, he wants to, like, murder her 'cause he's been programmed to murder her, but they also, like, kind of dig each other, like, they find each other attractive. So as long as he's not, like, looking at her, they can, like, talk and stuff, so they have, like, these little clandestine meetings in the dark, and I really like that. It gives me, like, Six of Crows vibes in that sense, and I think that's why I read this book is to see what happens with the 2 of them. Ugh, okay, so I have a weekly reading vlog, which basically turned into I have a weekly reading vlog that basically turned into a Shantaram vlog that I haven't had the, like, desire to edit yet because it's a lot of footage, and I went through the book, and I don't know if I wanna go through me going through the book again, but I will do it for you. But I read Shantaram, it took too long, and I I don't know how to recommend this book to people because it's not that the book is bad, it's that it's not for me. If you do not like very like male-centric, adventurous stories that seem to go on forever, you're not going to like this book. For me, if it had been shorter, I would have liked it. If it had had slightly less philosophizing in it at like the end of every chapter, that would have been great too. I honestly wish I hadn't read it. I feel bad saying that because I didn't hate it exactly, but it wasn't worth all the time I put into it, I guess is the best way I could say that. And then with the Plec group, I read There Are More Things by Yara Rodriguez Fowler, and this is where Plec comes from. And this is a story about two different women, and they meet. One is a Brazilian woman who's in the UK for school, and she rents a room in this flat, and from this lady who is also Brazilian, but her mother has passed, and she sort of has abandoned a lot of like her Brazilian roots. And the story basically unfolds between the two of them going back and forth between their points of views, their mothers, their stories, uh, touching on the more modern history of Brazil and their struggles and dictatorship and et cetera, and freedom fighting and revolutionaries and all of that. It's a very slow book. It took me a while to really connect, and then when I connected, I really, really loved it. There are moments where I almost cried. It's a book that I kind of thought I would have given up on early on, and I'm glad I didn't. It was very good. I would read this and I would keep going. It might not be like your favorite book, but if you have it and you want to read it and you've been trying to figure out if it's something for you, I think it's worth a shot. White Horse by Erica T. Worth was our Patreon buddy read for the month. It was a kind of underwhelming, honestly. I would be interested to read more from Erica Worth. I think this is their debut. If I'm wrong, editing Alyssa will correct me. But I think it was their debut. It's Indigenous story. I liked kind of some of the things that were happening in it. It was a horror. There were some great scenes where like this one like character that's haunting her, she would wake up and like this character be like in the room, like silently screaming with like blood coming out of her mouth. It was like chilling and haunting, and I loved that. But then there were things that I just didn't really, there's parts of the storyline I didn't think needed to be there. Like some of the stuff with her friend and her like drunk husband, I didn't really know why we needed to be there as much or spend so much time there. And like there were just things, it felt very debut. And there were other books that do similar things with like dream and horror and finding or reconnecting with your indigenous roots that I think do it better, like Bad Cree. So I didn't entirely. It was a mid book. It was very mid. Again, I'm very curious to see what she comes out with next. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I have her whole reading vlog for this. It was fun. It's a good time. If you like romantasy, if you just want a fun read for the beach or the pool or like on your on vacation or you're just having a weekend to yourself, I think it's totally worth it. It's fun. But the hype that's around it right now, I don't think that's worth it. I don't think it's worth any of the hype that's surrounding it. The Milky Way by Moya McTeer. I am sad to say this was a disappointment. This was not what I was hoping it would be. So this is written as like an autobiography of the universe, like the Milky Way wrote an autobiography of as self, like itself. And I was expecting, I guess, a different tone. Like the Milky Way was a little too sassy and judgmental for me. Um, it felt weird, and it feels weird to say it in here. And I wanted more nonfiction and less narrative in my narrative nonfiction, if that makes sense. So, I didn't really enjoy it. I did enjoy the beginning. There's a little introduction by the author and the story of the author and her life and how she became fascinated with like astronomy. That's really interesting. And I would like to know more about that and like their work and all this stuff. But the book just, I don't know, the tone of it was very strange to me. I read Imogen Beanie's Nevada, and I did love this. And again, kind of like the Milky Way, though, the story is good. The story feels a bit like kind of breast and eggs, where you have somewhat connected novellas that are smushed together as a novel. But what I really loved was there was an interview with the author at the end of the audiobook that was very interesting, talking about trans culture, translit, the zine culture, and a lot of the things that are happening with the characters in the story, bringing it to like a personal level. And you could see how the author's personal experiences and lived experiences are reflected in these characters. You have a trans woman in the first half, and it's like her life and her struggles. And then eventually she leaves and goes on this road trip. And by road trip, I mean like the road trip happens between the two books. We're just ignoring him because all day these dogs have been barking and I cannot get anything filmed. We're plowing forward. She's struggling with a lot of things like identity and her work and her job and her relationships and all this stuff. Sort of like I don't want to call it coming of age, but like kind of like coming of age like struggles, or maybe just those like kind of quarter life struggles that you go through. And then the next story happens, and in between, I guess there's a road trip. In the next book, she like meets some random kid who she gets the sense is trans but doesn't understand that he is, and they kind of have this brief encounter in Las Vegas. And so you get to kind of see like two different sides of a lived experience, like somebody trying to figure out their identity and somebody who very much knows their identity and is struggling kind of with all of it now that they know everything and all of that. So it was a very interesting book. I do not like that it gets billed as a road trip novel or like turning the road trip novel on its head or like on the road, like queer on the road or like any of these weird taglines that people give it because it's not a road trip novel. Not Jack Kerouac. It's something entirely different, and I feel like it's very I don't know, I feel like it's taking something away from what this book is and the power of this book and, like, the raw reality of that this book is portraying by equating it to things that it isn't. I just don't like that, that bothered me. The House Witch is the first in a trilogy of cozy fantasy that I read this month, and this was just really fun. There's this witch, he's a chef, he can use his powers to, like, uh, cook and do things and manipulate things within the home, but he's kind of like I think he's called like a hybrid witch or something. So there's like more like pure witches that deal with like pure elemental magic. I don't want to call them purebred because that sounds weird, but they have pure magic. Like they deal with fire, air, earth, like the elements. That's it. They don't do anything else. They a wind witch can't be like a water witch. But there are these random genetic mutations that make hybrid witches that can do different things. And they're kind of like second class citizens. Like they're not really respected. There's also mages who are people who learn magic, which is interesting because there's a whole nother dynamic of people who are judging each other. There's a lot in this little book. It's not even that little, it's like 300 or 400 pages, but there's a lot in this book. I really enjoyed it. It's heartwarming. There's a little romance. There's a really lovely king. There's a really lovely like prince who's young and fun. There's his cat familiar who's very like endearing. It's just a sweet read. Basically, there's like a war that's coming. We find out that our good witch has there's more to him than I think he even realizes. He ends up becoming like this savior in a lot of different ways in different areas inside the kingdom and the castle and the household. There's a threat from abroad. There's 2 more books. I can't wait to read them all. It's just a good time. It is simple and fun and cozy, and yeah. Check out 19 by Claire Louise Bennett. I didn't love this book, but I didn't hate this book. Some of my friends really hated it, and I didn't feel that strongly. Like, I feel like when I hate a book, like I hate a book, like it's a very strong visceral reaction. Like, there were moments that I didn't dislike about Checkout 19. Can I explain this entire book? No, because I don't get exactly what was supposed to be happening with this. It felt more like a creative writing exercise than a novel of any sort. But what I liked was, I think in some ways this book was supposed to be our main character telling us kind of about her life, but through literature and through their connection with story. And the parts of the book that I liked were, there were moments when they were talking about like actual books, real things that we would all know and understand the reference to, and that reverence to literature and reading and books. I enjoyed that. Some of those passages I found were really quite lovely. That was maybe like 20% of the book, but then there were other things that, like, literally made no sense. I couldn't quite follow. It felt like a little try hard, a little fake deep. I don't know. There was something, again, it just felt like a journal, like something you would do in like a creative exercise, a journal, like a series of creative writing prompts that were smushed together into a story. But I didn't hate it. I don't think you need to read it, but I didn't hate it. Case Study is the penultimate 2022 Booker book that I needed to read. I am not reading Booth. I'm sorry. I decided I'm not doing it. Life is too short. I did Shantaram. I can't do Booth. I did enjoy this. Not that I can tell you what any of these characters' names were. Not that I can really recall all that much. I just remember really enjoying it while I was reading it. Is our main character actually the sister? Does she have DID? I don't know. There's this like quack psychologist. Like, he's not even a psychologist. I don't know what he is. He's like self-proclaimed psychologist that tries to, like, in like the 60s or 70s in the UK, and he's like trying to do like pop psychology on people, and like goes against the he's like counterculture psychology or something. And he's kind of famous and he has a big following. And this our main character, his her sister, who is like the perfect person, had been seeing him, and then she kills herself. And our main character is trying to figure out if he like made her kill himself herself, what happened. There were like Teal Swan vibes on this guy. Like, I was just enjoying the vibes, I guess is what it is. The book really makes no sense. Like, there's no real point to it all. Like, I don't quite understand why we did any of the stuff that we did. I don't really understand what the point of it all was, but I just enjoyed it. I 100% enjoyed the vibes. I enjoyed vibing with a little like culty kind of leader, like Gwyneth Paltrow, Teal Swan, kind of like spiritual, but making it like a mental health kind of bent. I don't know. It was a good time. And I kind of liked our main character. She was totally unreliable. She was a little twisted. I really think she may have had multiple personalities. Like, it was just fun. Like, but why it was nominated for a Booker, I don't know. I don't think it was Booker worthy, but it was a good time. I did enjoy it. Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant was another book that I shouldn't have been reading while that the billionaires were under the ocean, but I was. And this was fun. So this has I read the prequel years ago, Rolling in the Deep, I think it is, or that's just an Adele song. Anyway, so I read the prequel to this years ago, and I finally found a copy while we were at no, where were we? We were at Strand, and I found a used copy of Into the Drowning Deep, so I picked it up. And I enjoyed this. It wasn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would be a little bit more in the sort of suspenseful gothic thriller kind of avenue of things. I thought it would be more tense as a read, but this was fun. Essentially, there are mermaids. There had been in the prequel, a boat goes out to try to find mermaids, and like they had brought fake mermaids on the with them as they were gonna like spoof it like for a documentary. Turns out there are mermaids. They are absolutely just violent killers, which they are in myth. And everybody from this expedition dies. They never come back. And then years later, they mount another expedition to try to prove that there really are mermaids. There's like a mermaid expert that goes. There's like bounty hunter people on there, like killers that that go like big game hunters. That's what it is. They're not bounty hunters, they're big game hunters. There's this really interesting mix of people that are on this boat for research, for the TV crew, for revenge, for what redemption, for all different reasons. And there's a lot of time spent basically in their dynamic, which I did enjoy. And there is time spent being like kind of spooky and dark, but I guess I just wanted Mira Grant, so lean a little bit more into the spooky dark. So it wasn't a 5-star read, but it was really good. The mermaids are very murderous. It's very interesting. I love me a good murdering mermaid. This was a surprise book, The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. I randomly saw somebody reading this on like Instagram or something, and I was like, oh, I'll try that. And this, I guess, is a technically a mystery, but essentially it gives you a little bit of like 1980s vibes, a little bit of Stranger Things vibes in terms of setting and time and place. They're in Niagara Falls in like the early 80s, I believe, or maybe the late 70s, about that time period. And then you follow a young boy and his kind of like kooky uncle who has like this oddity shop, magic shop. He's like all into conspiracy theories. He has this red phone where he gets all these things. Like people call him in and tell him about like Bigfoot or whatever, or like alien sightings and all this stuff. So like there's a little something off about Uncle, but he's like charming and cute and nice. And like he starts taking his nephew and two of their friends to these like doing this like Saturday Night Ghost Club thing. Things happen. Are they paranormal? Are they not? He's telling the kids stories. They kind of freak them out. And through all these stories, you find out like what actually really happened with the uncle. And it's very sad. And it's very focused on like grief and mental health and like your family system and your support system, I mean, with your family and like love and loss. And it's really surprisingly good. Definitely read this. I was shook. I thought this was just gonna be like a cute little story, and it really packed a heck of a lot of like a bigger punch than I ever expected it to. And I pleasantly surprised. Absolutely love this. Please read this. Tell me what you thought about it. Also, if you were somebody who grew up kind of like in that era, or if you've ever been to like upstate New York, like Canada border, and you understand like what that area is like it feels very you feel very connected to place and time, which I also really enjoyed, and I think that's why a lot of people like my age really liked Stranger Things. I know a lot of people did, but a lot of people my age liked Stranger Things because it felt like Goonies and things like that. But anyway, I also read A Little Luck by Claudia Pinheiro, which did I put that review up? I don't know if I put that review up. I have a review of that. I know I filmed it. It'll be up soon. I love this. She wrote Elena Knows. They are different books. Elena Knows is a little like more impactful and political, and this is a little bit quieter and slower to unfold and more like personal. But I love them both. They're so good. It's about a woman basically returning home uh, to Argentina for like a business thing. She left 20 years before. There was a traumatic event that happened. There's a reason why she's been avoiding certain people and avoiding Argentina and how she severed all connection. And you slowly get unraveled the story of why and what happened. And you see her deal with things. And it's just so beautifully written. And I cannot wait to see what Claudia Pinheiro comes out with next or what we translate next because she has a whole like catalog of books, but they're not all translated into English. I believe there's only two translated into English. Elena Knows and this. Those are the only ones I'm aware of. If there are more, please tell me. But again, thank you Charco Press for sending me this because it's so beautiful. Loved it. I read Death in Venice by Thomas Mann, which is on the channel as well. Definitely a review that I struggled to to film. I enjoyed this. I'm curious to read more from him, but we also spent a lot of time, my friends and I, sort of dissecting Thomas Mann as a person and how sort of disgusting he was, potentially problematic, and all of that. So he just gives me the ick, but the writing was really good. But I still felt really icky because it is about a man obsessing over a boy, and there's like different ways to read it. I feel like you can read it as a man obsessing over like youth and beauty and that unspoiled moment in time before you grow up and everything happens, and because it is an old man sort of at the end of his life and all of that, but it's also an old man lusting after a young boy, which is totally creepy and gives me the ick, and I don't like it, but it's a hard book for me, like emotionally. But definitely worth it. It's short, it's a little novella, short story. Worth it, but hard read. Juno Loves Legs by Carl Geary. This I did enjoy, but I don't know, I feel like it could have been, like, sadder. Just sad, because it is quite sad. But you have like Juno and Langs, who are young kids growing up in Ireland. They're not like popular kids, they're kind of outcast kids. They don't have the greatest parents for different reasons. They bond together. You see a lot of how terrible like Catholic school is. And I think I kept saying in the buddy read for this how like I don't understand how anybody could be Catholic. Like why would you subject yourself to all this abuse and pain and like nuns and priests like hitting you and verbally abusing you and doing all these things. Like I don't get it. But like, as somebody who has massively moved away from the church over years, and I never was even Catholic. It is hard for me to understand why you would say, not to like judge people who do, just saying like it's really hard in my brain because like for me personally, I could not stand it. I understand as children going through the schooling that they went through, like you don't have a lot to say, you're stuck. There is that like lack of autonomy. But like as an adult, like why would anybody stay? Why are parents okay with like corporal punishment and all of that. Like it's very weird to me. Like the whole thing's very strange to me. But yeah, it is sad. But I think I could have been written in a more emotionally sad way. I think the small vignettes, which makes it easier to digest and approach these really tough topics and sad things, um, will be good for some people. But for me, I really want to be like emotionally wrecked when I read. So I just wanted it to emotionally wreck me. And then finally, I have what is actually kind of a disappointment, which it should be clear that it will be, is Centaur and Sensibility, which is a, a random Kindle Unlimited book that just happened to pop up in my ads on my Kindle, and I was dying laughing. And some people said read it, so I read it. And let me just tell you, there was no smut. There was just some smooching, and I'm disappointed in that. But dare I say, this is like romance magical realism because it plays with like time, and there are things that happen in it that you're just supposed to just kind of like accept. And I don't even mean the fact that there are like centaurs in like Regency England that are like a second class set of citizens inside of Regency England. But basically, we have a young woman who's supposed to be marrying this like very jowly old man, and she's like, no. And so she runs away. She's going to run away to her aunt in Bath, who's like a young widow who refuses to get married again because why would you? You're a young widow living it up in Bath. And she starts walking to get the mail coach. She ends up like kind of like moving off the road into the woods because she sees some people and she doesn't want to be caught. And then somehow when she enters the woods, time changes. And that's where the magical realism comes into this. She ends up running into a centaur who's like a navvy, like he's like a surveyor for the railroad. And they kind of get stuck trying to figure out how to get out of the woods. Like time and distance have warped. Like he's like, how long have you been walking? And she's like, 2 hours. Where did you start? And he's like, that's like 12 hours from here. And so like time is weird, distance is weird. They kind of go around in circles. Don't understand how clothes work because he has like a jacket, but like he's clearly not wearing horse pants. But anyway, it was an interesting morning read. There is like a Manners and Manticore or something like that. I may have to read that one. I'm not sure, but anyway, disappointed. I wanted more smut. I wanted you to really go for it, not just some smooching. Go for it, but they didn't. Anyway, that was everything I read in June. I'd love to know some of your favorites that you read in June. If you've read any of these, I'd love to know your thoughts. I always like talking about books with people. Yeah, hopefully July is better. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me, trying to find another